I think, how you get creative with the budget is important. It's not all about flat, like, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but on a bigger scale. It's not just take the whole budget and times it by 1.25 because the business is going to grow
Yeah,
by 1.25.
exactly.
Like it is actually saying, last year, this kind of tactic was really effective for us. We believe we want to scale it.
Your spreadsheet might tell you that ROI from Google ads or LinkedIn ads or a particular channel is like better than any other channel. But that doesn't mean that you can just go ahead and invest 100% more budget into that channel and get the same ROI on it. In fact, oftentimes it means the complete opposite. Hi everyone, welcome back to Demand Decoded. Dan here with Amanda, Blend's commercial director. Great to have Amanda back. And on today's episode, we are talking about budget planning and in particular, like the growth budget for B2B teams and go-to-market teams. And obviously this is a really timely episode because budget season is well and truly underway for most teams right now. And hopefully we can bring a bit of a different angle and perspective on this today. We're not really talking about marketing plus sales budget. Like, we're talking about them together holistically. Whilst we'll cover both, I think it's important to note that, yeah, we're framing this as a growth budget, which is really important. And, the ins and outs of how you think about it, how you craft it, how you get sign off on it, and everything else along the way.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic. And certainly for me, and probably you as well, we're coming at this for ourselves quite differently this year. Historically, I've always looked at things from a marketing perspective. This is my first year in a sales seat, effectively. So seeing it from the other side actually, I think, opens up a different perspective on the conversation. And that's where this topic really came from.
Before we get into the podcast today, here's a quick word from our sponsors, HubSpot. Think about listening to this podcast right now. You're probably multitasking and catching 70, maybe 80% of it. Now flip that and imagine only catching 20%. That'd be pretty crazy, right? Yet most businesses only use 20% of their data. All the important details in call logs, emails, and chats just left floating in digital space. HubSpot gives you access to those insights to help your business grow. Because when you know more, you grow more. Visit HubSpot.com to get the full picture today. I kind of noticed this earlier when we were chatting. Like, I thought it was really interesting. This was, the topic was your idea. Framing it as the growth budget is a really interesting point because we did a similar topic last year all around, marketing budgeting, but actually weaving in the sales piece. And when you understand actually how, if you craft this budget together, it gives it a whole new meaning.
And it can be greater than the sum of its parts, which is one of the most important things any business can do. It's one of the classic issues is that marketing and sales are isolated from each other or not really focused on the same things. But actually, ultimately, close one revenue is what everyone should be focusing on. And so creating a holistic budget and going for that holistic budget with thinking about how can we combine our efforts and do the best work to bring the right customers in and close them, I think is what everyone should be looking to try and do. And more than that as well, I think it will mean that those budgets are more effective because ultimately you want sales team members to get involved in marketing areas and you want marketing to have impact in the sales process. It's not really like the clear handoff should exist even even where it does currently exist. The best practice is always to make sure that yes, marketing's primary function is going to be to bring in net new opportunities for sales to close, but marketing continues to work while the sales process is ongoing, and sales coming out from sort of within the business and being present is an important part of most businesses' marketing strategies, because where are your thought leaders and where are the people who are going to talk to and build relationships? You want to show them, you want them to be doing speaking slots and so on. So yeah, people talk about breaking down silos. That stuff's quite naff. But really what we're talking about is how can we do better work if we're working together, looking at the money and thinking about its best use and make the right case to senior leadership as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a great cultural thing to align on, right? Like aligning on the budgets, like just bouncing ideas back and forth, understanding like how both of you can invest together better the following year is like really powerful to be like, okay, we have these events in mind, like how do marketing and sales then both support on this? Like events in particular would be a line item that is kind of like both marketing and sales. You don't really have a marketing event without sales input at some point in the journey, and you don't really have a sales event that isn't touched even a little bit by marketing. Like, you know.
No, exactly. One of the things that we've always acknowledged is that personal relationships are easy to cultivate and curate than faceless ones. And your sales team are the face of the company once you start talking to people. So bringing those faces out and into your events is critical. But marketing then serves to actually make it easier for that face to go further. Like it's about amplification is one of marketing's jobs, but content actually needs to come from sales too. I think one of the things that we've really benefited from this year is we've always been treated as one team, even though we have very different functions within that team. You and I talk constantly about campaigns and what we're trying to achieve with them, and you're hearing what's going on in the sales process. That collaboration is something that I think most business leaders would strongly benefit from, would appreciate, and I think it's something that more companies need to get on and do. So yeah, how do you go to bat together to ask for the right sum of money to do the things that will be most effective in meeting your company's goals?
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be interesting to hear, to start things off, like how has your mindset shifted this past year and like going into next year? Obviously now being hot in the sales seat, like obviously, you know, we've spoken about marketing budget and we'll get on to that, but like how has the mindset shifted? What are you thinking about from a sales budgeting perspective going into next year?
I suppose the thing that I am thinking about most is when you are building out a sales team at the moment, it is what's the right balance to create between using automation, AI to scale your efforts, and then when do you actually need additional heads and where are heads the most effective? As we've talked about previously when it comes to marketing teams, I think that there is a lot of power for sales teams to be leaner and more effective, but it does rely on that senior expertise to deliver. You need someone who's got gravitas, who can build up thorough knowledge to sell something at high value. You can't do that with someone junior, just as you can't start marketing off with your social media intern. It doesn't work. So it is there are more parallels between the functions than I had ever realized before I changed sides. And certainly I think the future is really bright for both sides in terms of what it means that sort of tight, lean, but expert teams can deliver on.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's a good perspective to have. Like coming from marketing, I think is a benefit in that. Like you can see both sides of the coin. And now you can take that into, you know, like sales perspective next year. So let's actually get into like how we think about budgeting next year. Like how do we actually come up with the number we need going into next year?
Well, of course, it all starts with that overall business goal. And the way I tend to think about it is that financial target, which is, you know, I think probably 80-90% of businesses, they only at the top level have sort of the really big numbers. What is the revenue we're expecting? What is the profit that we want? How many people do we want to be serving on it? Or what are the costs? What's the cost of sales element that we're expecting? I suppose, which obviously, is the relationship between profit and revenue there as well. I think those are at high level. Most businesses are really only delivering that in terms of the vision. Every time you're thinking about marketing and how marketing needs to contribute to that, you want to be splitting out what's marketing's contribution to net new and what is their contribution to existing, if anything, because in most cases, marketing's not contributing anything to existing, it's contributing to net new only. And then what's the split in net new between inbound marketing efforts and what other outbound efforts are going on? But when it comes to thinking about the budget, one of the things we talked about earlier, which I think is important, when you've got your business objective, your budget is often likely to be a conservative take on that. That's going to be, your goal is often more aspirational than your budget sets out. But frustratingly, for a lot of people, budget is where budget is set. So the money is set at this level, even if the goal might be 10%, 20% higher than that. So you have to think within that framework. Okay, the budget was this last year. The budget is likely to be that next year, unless I strongly make the case for more and do so now before that budget is set. I think the things that you need to then look at are breaking down that performance further. And one of the things that we talked about is marketing is a budget that, is often cut, and actually sales budgets can be cut as well. But you need to look at what really contributed to what level of success you had year to date, because it might be actually that marketing is overperforming, but there are other issues. So it might not be that there haven't been enough net new leads. It might be that there's a higher churn rate than was anticipated, or it might be that there and that could be existing business churn. Maybe you had one massive customer that you lost and you couldn't replace all of that, so there was a real mountain, a Sisyphean task of trying to climb up something that was slipping for marketing to deliver on. It's really important to break down and understand, did marketing contribute to its own efforts? So, if there was any kind of loss or slowdown compared to what was hoped for, you can say, yes, but marketing's performance within it was actually this, so we shouldn't penalise marketing for that. Or more importantly, we're talking about this as the growth budget. What's the growth that they are aspiring to, and what do you really think it will take in terms of budget in order to make that possible?
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways to go about getting the figure that you should go ahead and, ask for in the budget ultimately. And there's lots of historic information out there about how it should be between 3 and 5% of revenue and things like that, according to Gartner. But I mean, when it comes to these sorts of numbers, there are people in this business much better than me at understanding them. But ultimately, marketing budget typically comes out of gross margin. So you need to consider that if your gross margin is really high or really low, your marketing investment should adjust accordingly with that. And it shouldn't be taken on that revenue figure. It should be taken on the gross margin figure.
Yes, absolutely.
So then based on that, if your gross margin is 40%, then your marketing investment might be between 8 and 10%, which is of revenue, because then that's 25% of gross margin. And then you can figure out the rest of whatever you do with that money in terms of the business. So yeah, that's just one myth I wanted to kind of bust on that, because I recall hearing that 3 and 5% figure quite a lot in marketing. And it's it's not that black and white actually when it comes to budgeting.
No, it really isn't. And I think as well, there's a constant evaluation needed in the art of marketing and in sales as well. We're thinking about extending beyond inbound into outbound here. What's going to be an effective use of the budget? And how do you dial the right level of that up? What's the sweet spot in terms of creating, ultimately marketing seeks to create something that is high value.
Yeah.
And what is the most high value thing that you can create? How can you do that with the best possible budget? Because it's not always about spending the most money. It is often about the time and the creativity that is invested into what you're creating. And if you are pooling resource and budget with sales and bringing them into that conversation, you will often create something that is more valuable. So yeah, I think, how you get creative with the budget is important. It's not all about flat, let's just keep doing what we're doing, but on a bigger scale. It's not just take the whole budget and times it by 1.25 because the business is going to grow by 1.25. Exactly. It is actually saying, last year, this kind of tactic was really effective for us. We believe we want to scale it. Here's how we're going to do that. And we're going to need this level of investment in this area, not like to the granular level. We're expecting to grow this area. We might see some decreases here because we're seeing this be less effective for us. So some of that's taken into account. But actually, we're only asking for 1.1 because we believe that this is the effective budget for what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And this can all come from like start, in my mind, at a demand waterfall type system that communities that I'm in, things that I hear kind of, dispel the need for any kind of waterfall model anymore because you can't really manufacture something in that way. And I agree, like to a certain extent, but it's a very useful exercise to do to give you something to start from.
But again, like, I think you can't manufacture who turns up ultimately. You can go more specifically after those people, and your outbound can do that, and using intent data can do that, and all of those great tactics can increase your likelihood of surfacing that kind of opportunity. But actually, what's also important is the sales side of that equation, because if you're saying as a business, we want to grow by 25% this year, but we want to do it without growing the number of clients. We want to grow the average customer value. How you incentivize sales is then just as important, and how you structure that is just as important as what you go to market with and say about it, because you want to reward the right behaviors of your sales team when the right opportunities come up. You want them to go out and sweat for that extra 100k to turn a 250k customer into a 350k customer, if that is the direction of travel. If it isn't, and you want them to spend that same amount of effort on getting 3 other customers, then that's fine. But like, your average deal value will go down. So yes, you can to some extent influence it, but you can't absolutely mandate it in marketing's terms. In sales, you do have the opportunity to say, yes, this is more valuable to us because it comes with a higher degree of recurring revenue, and that's part of our broader goals and our sense of where we're traveling to in terms of valuation, for example. There are lots of things that you need to think about at that senior strategic level, and part of the effort of going after any budget is always putting yourself in the shoes of your SLT, asking yourself, what are they looking for, what matters to them, and how can I structure my information so that it addresses that best.
That's a really good point, actually, about how to approach like the goals of the business. Like you say, is it, a high volume of new customers, or is it actually expanding lifetime value? Because that should also shift the marketing goals. Not only shifts the sales goals, how they're incentivized, but actually from a marketing perspective, well, why are we still, being like held to ransom over a lead volume number, for example, when actually the business goal is to expand our existing customer base and like get higher value customers with a better lifetime value.
Exactly.
Like, it all needs to align.
If you think that 50% of your business's growth is going to come from existing customers next year, probably 50% of your marketing budget needs to go into that directly, because actually making sure that your existing customers are fully aware of the full spectrum of your offering, and they are regularly being retouched even when they are not actively in contact with you, because maybe your service is running in the background, or it's just a platform that they are engaging with but they don't think about the other things it could bring them. All of these things are important efforts for growing your customer base, your existing customer base, as well as things that will contribute to educating potential new customers. So actually thinking about, if that is our overall goal, if our overall goals include a significant increase in, cross-sell and upsell, how is marketing going to facilitate that? That's an important piece of the puzzle too.
Yeah, absolutely. Understand. Yeah. I wrote down, at the start of this conversation, expansion and new, because like you have to understand the business goals around those areas and like divert budget, marketing and sales resource in that case, into those right areas.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Coming on to actually like making the case for budget, I think this is an interesting one, because there's no right or wrong way to approach like getting sign off on a budget, because all businesses are different. All like senior stakeholders around that budget are different. All CFOs are different, and all will like to take a different approach to doing that.
Yeah.
One thing that like I like to do is basically get people on board before you even have that conversation.
Mhm.
Like they're already bought into the budget like in August.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we've already been speaking around some of the things that are like working, some of the plans we might have for next year.
Yeah.
You know, you're already talking about those, how we could, you know, invest in this area next
Mm.
year, how we can collaborate on this thing with sales. So it's like when it actually comes around to it, it's just a natural conversation, really. It's like, oh yeah, of course we're doing that. Like
Yeah.
we've already spoken about that.
In many ways, what you're doing within any business is it's a stakeholder management. It's a sales process to some extent. You are drip feeding that information about what you would like to go after and why, and you're building up that buy-in over time. All of that hinges on knowing your audience really well, and I think,
Yeah.
even bigger organizations, knowing your audience down to the person is really important. Knowing what does land with them and what doesn't. I feel like we end up talking about this almost with every topic, but I actually do think it is one of the hardest parts of marketing as a role or sales leadership as a role, is understanding that your world is not your leader's world, and you are the only person who can make that translation happen. And the translation is the nuts and bolts of what am I actually granularly going to tell them, and the other side of it is the relationship. How am I going to make it land with them? What will work and what won't work? And the critical evaluation of those points, I think, is key. Obviously, you've been approaching this a lot this year and thinking about this across all of your stakeholders. What are the things that have sort of helped you structure that information?
Yeah, it's really interesting because all stakeholders are different as well, right? Like a lot of, you know, some people will want more information than others. The marketer of the world, you know, or ex-marketer wants to see everything. You know, they want to be in the weeds with you at this time of the year. Like they're excited to see, you know, what might come next year. Then the actual, you know, like CEO or business owner, they don't care about like what channel did what last year. They just want to know, what did we invest? What did we get out of it?
Mhm.
Basically, money in, money out.
Yeah, I think they also always want to know, are you changing your approach based on what's working?
Yeah.
Like, what can they use from what you're telling them to assess whether what you're doing and the way you're approaching things is any good? Like,
Yeah.
and so thinking about how you furnish them with that information without bogging them down with jargon and things that will make them switch off and start checking like their messages and emails is quite an important consideration, I think, actually.
Absolutely. It's telling the story, ultimately, like in a compelling way, in an engaging way. Like, I mean, I have a ton of data. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. Most of it will be hidden. Most of it will go into the appendix.
Yeah.
And, like, we'll touch on it if we absolutely need to. Ideally, I'm just showing top level figures of, like, here's what happened last year. Here's why it happened. Here's what we want to get to next year. Here's what we need to get there. And, like, here's what we're shifting in order to do that.
Yeah.
Really, then we can dive into all of the individual stats, metrics, things if we absolutely need to. Ideally, that's just for my benefit.
Yeah.
Like during the process, really.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's good to furnish yourself with information so that you know when asked or pushed on something, I've got something to fall back to. Great. But at the same time, yeah, it's about crafting that storytelling and making sure that what you're bringing to the table is the right message for the audience that you have. One of the things that I was thinking about when we were chatting about this earlier is that ultimately, when you think about some of the tactics and the strategies that we are employing these days, there are great ways of spinning or telling the story on that shows that actually some of the things that your leaders, your founders were doing to get your company off the ground actually are things that now are marketing tactics. And it's like, oh, we've always done networking, we used to do events and so on. But actually, at the time when that was being done, it wasn't really thought of as marketing. In the same way that chatting to your mates in a networking event and getting some business out of them wasn't really thought of as sales. Everything about getting a budget and putting a process in place is systemizing what was done informally at earlier stages or what was done under different umbrellas. Actually, those tactics worked for a reason because they were human tactics. We've definitely talked plenty this year about how in the world of AI, the human relationship is more important than ever to anchor things into reality and make people and companies feel tangible. So it's not that we're like going back to old tactics, but anchoring in them is important. And that gives you a great opportunity in the storytelling about the budgets that you're setting. If you're using any of those or planning to, yes, we are taking those approaches that have worked for you so well in the past and we're leaning into them, but we're doing so in a professionalized and ultimately,
it's scalable.
a scalable version of that. Yeah, exactly.
Like so many systems that we build, like even in marketing, if we're just doing, a few videos here and there, we're just doing a few videos here and there. There's no system behind it. There's no strategy behind it. It's just what we're doing. It's only when you put that system in place, when you have that like repeatable process, it becomes something you might add a line item in the budget for. Here's a quick story from us at Blend and our customer, Daytel. Daytel were launching a completely new product in a brand new market with a different type of buyer. To do this effectively, they knew they needed to rebrand, overhaul their website, and rethink their go-to-market strategy. We partnered with them to achieve this, transforming their brand, rebuilding the site with their new identity, and working with them long-term to shift from lead generation to demand generation. The impact? 35% more revenue, 63% more profit, and 800% ROI from marketing. And to top it off, a HubSpot Impact Award to recognize the success that we had together. This is what happens when you have a partner who has strategic, creative, and technical expertise all working together. If you're in a similar place and want to discuss how we can help your business grow, just head over to blendb2b.com. If you're enjoying this show, let me recommend another one from the HubSpot Podcast Network that I personally never miss. Nudge, hosted by Phil Agnew. What I love about Nudge is that it's all about the psychology and science behind human behavior. What makes us take action, form habits, or say yes. And then it shows how those same principles shape great marketing and sales. In one episode, Phil looks at how just 3 words in a text message boosted vaccination rates and may have saved hundreds of lives. That's the endowment effect at work, a tiny psychological nudge creating a huge outcome. Every episode of Nudge is about 20 minutes, fast-paced, no fluff, and packed with ideas you can actually use. Check it out. Nudge is available wherever you get your podcast. A good data point that we could have at our disposal for both marketing and sales is the source of our pipeline. Like that is interesting to all stakeholders. Like, where are we actually getting the best pipeline in? Whether it converts or not, obviously we want to hyper focus on the part that converts, but we also might lose some business that we wanted to win. Understanding the sources, and that can be bucketed into, like high intent leads through the website, events, partners, referrals, like understanding those big buckets for marketing and sales is really interesting to look at, and where we can actually think, okay, maybe if we added some more resource there to amplify partnerships, or if we did some more around events here, or how do we actually get more high intent leads through the website? Like you don't need to necessarily go a level deeper at that point in the conversation, but understanding that high level view is quite interesting.
Yes, I think it is. I think as well, if we go back to that strategic point of what do we want the shape of the business that we ultimately end up doing to look like, when you think about average deal size, that's really important too. So if LinkedIn is bringing in good volume, but they are too small overall, do you actually want to continue investing in that area? Or if events only brought in X, but the value was that much higher, do you want to swing in that direction instead? I think a lot of this stage of the year is more or less about breaking things into percentage chunks and saying, of the budget that we've got, if of the budget that we're asking for, we want to put this much effort into this with a goal of achieving that, and this much effort over here with a goal of achieving this. But different tactics, different channels, we know influence things coming through in different shapes, either net new or different deal sizes coming out of existing business and so on. So I think really understanding how much, what size, that's very important, and then aligning that with, again, the overarching objectives. Okay, LinkedIn was a great channel for us last year, but we've already said that small to medium business isn't our future. So we're not going to invest in it in the same way. We'll keep the lights on,
Yeah.
but we're not going to go after that channel with a vengeance ultimately. Oh yes, actually over here we're seeing some great traction from this kind of ad, and it's hitting the right fit ICP. Lovely. Let's make sure that a higher proportion of the budget goes that way, and let's see what else we can do to continue to innovate in that channel this year.
Yeah, like you've hit the nail on the head there, which is understanding the future ICP, not just like your current customer profile. Like,
Yes.
where do you actually want to go? Because that's different to where you've been investing budget in the past. If all of a sudden you want 50% of your customers to be upmarket, well, your investment, your channel mix, like your deployment's going to look very different in that sense, because the way they buy is different. Like the channels they use is potentially different. The content they consume is different. So how do you like, then it comes back to buyer insight and to a certain extent like gut feel. And that doesn't have to be on marketing solely, it doesn't have to be on sales solely. Like that's a collective kind of discussion and, you know, feeling around like, how do we actually reach these buyers? How do we research them? How do we, you know, get that insight to then feed what we do?
Yeah, we strongly feel this as a group. Some of the evidence backs us up. It's heuristic, it's qualitative, not quantitative to some extent, but buy-in is so important. If everyone's like, but we don't, you know, we're not going to get behind those channels and those tactics because our gut isn't that that's what's going to work for us, it's going to be harder. So like some of it is down to the humans around the table and what they are going to do best at, and your success is coming out of your best people ultimately. Another really big consideration when it comes to budget is if you, as you say, the ICP has changed, then the effort and the investment needs to take that into account when it comes to your planned MROI. Like if this is a year where you have to reposition or rebrand or do a major investment like a website project, your MROI is going to go down for that year. If you don't want that to lead to fewer conversions and less in the pipeline, then you are going to need to think about, okay, ring fencing the budget for those big projects and initiatives separate to the ongoing growth and the campaigns that support them. If you've invested heavily over the years in a whole bunch of SMB campaigns, but you've just said, no, we're going after mid-market now, then there is an extent to which tearing things down and starting things up again costs money that will not recoup itself immediately. And so understanding that when you're going into the budget, yes, we're still talking about growth, but it's because that strategic swing is there and we need to invest because that will continue to pay dividends over the long term. We hope it will more than make up for itself, because maybe the reason we're moving to mid-market is that we've seen that the opportunity there is enormous and we could have only just started tapping it, and we think it will more than recoup itself. But that's a place where being conservative, I think, is really important, and saying, you know, yes, we're going to have to make these strategic investments, but we can't lose the budget to do all of these other things as well.
Yeah, most business owners that have a longer term outlook on things will understand that as well. That, okay, right, we do need to rebrand in order to reposition effectively. Okay, that might just be, you know, slightly less effective ROI in the next year, but we'll make that up as we, you know, start to gain traction in this market and like work more effectively in it. In years 2 and 3 after that rebrand, will be a much more effective like business in that market.
And I think for you as marketers and as sales as well, really making sure you know your existing collateral and what you've already got together, how much of that needs to change. And if you're like, actually, to build up to the same point in this new area, whatever your pivot has been ultimately, we're going to need to be creating for a solid 6 months before we've got anything that's got traction on its own. Being candid about that is important. It's an important outcome of those strategic choices.
One extra thing which doesn't necessarily flow straight on from that, but it's in my mind, is the importance of like not just looking at a spreadsheet and acting on that. Because your spreadsheet might tell you that ROI from Google ads or LinkedIn ads or a particular channel is like better than any other channel. But that doesn't mean that you can just go ahead and invest 100% more budget into that channel and get the same ROI on it. In fact, oftentimes it means the complete opposite, that like you're going to saturate that channel. It's the strategy that you've applied with that small budget isn't going to apply with the big budget as well. And like, I've seen that mistake happen before
Mhm.
where, okay, that line item looks brilliant in terms of ROI, but actually it doesn't quite translate to bigger budgets.
No, I do agree with that. I think overall in marketing, something that I always come back to is a bit like the Ron Swanson quote: "Don't like half-ass two things, whole-ass one thing." Like really, genuinely,
Yeah.
dividing your efforts always diminishes those individual efforts versus putting more effort into one thing. However, marketing is never absolute. It is never done. It is an art with some scientific elements, not a science in
Yeah.
itself. And so there is no particular formula that will work 100% of the time. You need to always leave room for experimentation and testing.
That's a good point.
You need to expect that channel behaviors will change over time. So, don't swing off anything 100% unless it has literally never brought you anything. And even if you're closing something off to that extent, you still probably do need to revisit it at least once a year. Like, oh, LinkedIn's never worked for us. Revisit that at least
Yeah.
once a year. Make sure that you are constantly revalidating your opinions because everything is evolving. Behavior is evolving. Platforms are, evolving as well. So you need to constantly be ready to be wrong in 6 months' time.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the budget is not fixed.
No.
The items you have in your budget can change. They can vary. You can take money out of one pot, you can put it into another pot. That's totally fine. That
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this static spreadsheet that never changes. It should change. If it's not changing, that's worrying.
Well, I think once you've got the budget agreed, it is immediately irrelevant in the sense that the forecast is where
Yeah.
accuracy is, and marketing needs to stay very, very closely aligned to the forecast to understand the money that is available. If you're having a better year, great, you can push for that additional thing. If you are having a bad year compared to forecast because something changed that you weren't expecting or things just didn't materialize the way that some team thought that they would, you need to be ready. If times get tough, you never want to be the one that the axe is coming down on.
Yeah.
You want to be looking and know your numbers well enough to say the best place to match this is here.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut back on this because I can see that. Showing that sensitivity throughout the year is absolutely gold to the business.
Yeah.
And say, I can sense that there's some caution here coming up, so we'll just pause on this and let that roll, and if things improve, then we'll bring it back into play, but we won't worry about it for now. Obviously, more optimistically and ideally, what you want to be saying is, I can see that this tactic is really working and we are growing, so I'd like to ask for doubling this area of the budget because I think that we could push things even further. You're only ever going to be able to make that sort of ask on the fly in the year if you are paying really close attention to the big numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. Such a good point. And also understanding when the large sums of money come out of the budget is important. Of course, the budget is set at the start of the year, but actually when that cash comes out of the business, if you have a massive trade show and you're pumping out, 500K for that, well, the CFO, the finance need to know like when that's coming out. Like, or from a marketing perspective, if there's, some cash flow issues, can you negotiate that? Can you push it out a bit? Can you like separate that budget out? Can you spread it over months? Like being open to that kind of thinking will help as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. I think that is probably wrapping us up just about. Any other like final thoughts on growth budgeting next year?
It's a team sport. It's always a team sport. And when I say that, I mean it's the bigger team. In that, it is how you, as you said, it's not just about floating ideas with your senior leaders. It is about bringing them along the journey. How can you get their buy-in for things throughout the year? And how can you engage with them to learn what they think about things so that you're bringing their ideas in, even if it's just making sure that you're doing the storytelling correctly around those ideas. So we've decided that this networking area is something that we want to invest more in because we know that you personally have seen great success in it in the past. Or actually, we want to revive this kind of event and we want you to be part of it. How you pitch these things is important. So it's know your wider team. That includes people above you as well as people to the side of you and below.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would say, focus on the fundamentals, work backwards from the big goals, speak your stakeholders' language is always going to be important. Different stakeholders are going to care about different things, and understanding those like on a personal level as well is really, really important and will help you get buy-in on that budget. And after that, present it, keep it like engaging and collaborative in some ways as well. So like the people who want to have and like input on that budget can do so and navigate that. Like if you don't think they should, still let them have an input, and if it's no, tell them why ultimately, and have fun.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time, and like actually thinking about the possibilities like should be fun. So
definitely.
Yeah. All right, cool. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you for listening to this episode of Demand Decoded or watching on YouTube. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much.
This episode of Demand Decoded was brought to you by Blend. We help B2B technology companies grow through strategic, creative, and technical expertise, bringing you the capabilities you need to drive demand and turn it into real revenue impact for your business. If you enjoyed this episode, follow Demand Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, leave us a quick review, and we'll see you next time with more insight to help you grow.